The educational background group split the data according to whether students attended a public, private, parochial, or international school. Although we hoped it would provide insight into the effect of socioeconomic status, the data had the most homogeneity of all 5 groups. When considering the wealth and income of parents of Georgetown students, we looked at the income brackets themselves instead. 20% of Georgetown parents fill the largest income bracket of above $300,000 per year, and 79% of parents make more than $75,000 per year. The median household income for the United States is about $50,000, so more than 3/4 of our students are far above that. Wealth and income are determinant factors in educational access and success. Most of these students likely attended a high school that reflected their parents' income, either a public school in a district with high tax revenues or a parochial or private school that their families could afford. The first key finding for the educational group was with international students in the bias reporting system, also known as the BRS. 32% of international students reported that they had some knowledge of the BRS, and only less than 30% of domestic students said the same. International students are the most aware group of students on campus about the BRS, but they are also the least likely group to report any incident of bias. Of the students that witnessed an incident of bias, only 5.4% of domestic students and absolutely none of international students said that they had reported the incident to the Department of Public Safety or to the bias reporting system. These troubling numbers suggest that the students are largely unaware of the bias reporting system's existence and aren't confident in the system enough to actually utilize it, particularly international students. It is imperative that the university specifically reach out to the international population. Through the already mandatory international student orientation, these students can be made more aware of bias-related incidents and how to respond to them. When considering Georgetown's Jesuit ideals, it's difficult to see a major difference between students that attended a public, private, parochial, or international school. However, out of all 4 groups, parochial students tended to best identify the Georgetown ideals, such as women and men for others or cura personalis. And they were also the most likely to believe that Georgetown both promoted and exhibited these ideals. Parochial students tended to be more familiar with the ideals and what they meant, likely from their experiences at their parochial schools, which might have promoted these ideals as well. For every single question about the 5 Jesuit ideals, although students may have stated that Georgetown promoted these ideals, a lower percentage of students felt that students exhibited these ideals. For example, about 1/4 of students strongly agree that Georgetown promotes educating the whole person, but less than 15% strongly agree that Georgetown students exhibit this ideal. These findings speak to the core of the ideals and educational standards that make up Georgetown University. These ideals, be they related to race, religion, or education, directly relate to the goal of diversity and service. Whereas the 5 ideals are greatly promoted and spoken about, it is less common to find them in practice on campus, particularly by students. For this reason, it is recommended that changes are made to certain aspects of student life to include diversity and help ensure that students exhibit the goals that Georgetown promotes. Thank you.
Our third research team to present will be gender and sexual orientation. The executive board members presenting for this group will be Andrea Bischoff and Kenneth Woods. Andrea is a junior in the School of Foreign Service as an international politics major. Although she is a transfer student, she is already heavily involved in the Georgetown community. Other than SCU, she is a part of Relay for Life, the SFS Academic Council, and STAND. Kenneth Woods is a senior in the college studying anthropology. Kenneth spent his last summer in France learning the language and absorbing the culture. Other than SCU, he is involved in the Residential Judicial Council, and he has campaigned to make the anthropology department at Georgetown its own department, and successfully succeeded.
When looking at issues of discrimination and self-segregation in relation to gender and sexual orientation, our data shows that LGBTQ students and women on certain issues are attentive to issues of discrimination and sexual orientation more than males and heterosexual students. LGBTQ students were most likely to disagree with the majority of students, highlighting major problems within the Georgetown community with respect to gender and sexual orientation. 67% of LGBTQ students reported feeling at least sometimes uncomfortable at Georgetown because of their identity. And this has a direct link to issues of discrimination, because 54% of LGBTQ students reported that they often feel as if they are the target of discrimination, whether verbally or physically. In other words, LGBTQ students often feel that they are discriminated against, and they feel therefore uncomfortable about their identity. In contrast, 23% of heterosexual students reported being at least feeling uncomfortable sometimes with their identity, and 15% reported that they often are the targets of discrimination. It is also not insignificant to note that when asked how students responded to instances of discrimination, 49% of heterosexual students reported that they simply ignored it.
LGBTQ-identified students are less likely than other students to believe that their peers, the Georgetown student body, represent the interreligious and Jesuit ideals of the university. Graph 22C demonstrates the extent of this disagreement. As you can tell by looking at this graph in your pamphlet, which isn't there, I'm sorry. Compared to other demographics, though, LGBTQ-identified students do not think that interreligious dialogue and respect is actually displayed on campus versus being promoted by the university. Our team could only ascertain one possible explanation for this disparity, namely that LGBTQ-identified students may be more aware of interreligious issues on campus, despite the fact that, and I am referencing back to this demographic's low attendance at religious services in preceding graphs, overall, they are not fully engaged in religious activities on campus. This can be stated only by assuming that all students, regardless of sexual orientation, are familiar with the definition of interreligious dialogue. But given the data points of other graphs in the same cluster, which showed some widespread confusion about certain Jesuit ideals, our team proposed that many students are largely unaware of the ways in which the Jesuit ideals can be enacted by the university, and more so, of how they themselves can realize these historic ideals in their daily lives. Thus, there are two distinct problems here. The first is how to better engage students in the Jesuit ideals, while the second is to focus this engagement on the LGBTQ community. The university must clearly define how interreligious understanding and the other Jesuit ideals can be lived out in a college setting. This is integral to the Jesuit mission that the university has undertaken since its inception, as well as to the standards by which Georgetown students themselves already live. Thank you very much.
Our fourth group presenting will be race. The research team representative for race is Daniel Alexander. Daniel is a sophomore in the business school as an anticipated management and music major. He is also involved in the Georgetown Guild of Bands and in the World Percussion Ensemble. Daniel joined SCU because he wanted to make the campus a more cohesive place, because although he has only been here a short while, he has noticed many issues in our small Georgetown community.
Hi, I will tell you a little bit about the findings from the race team. One student's response in the SCU survey signaled at the idea that racism is a non-factor within the Healy Gates. Using the example of racially segregated student groups, the student pointed out that the separation was not due to racism, but due to a differing set of interests. In other words, white students don't get involved with the Black Student Alliance because the interests of the Black Student Alliance don't necessarily match with their own. While this may hold true for some students, the actual survey data points at the contrary. When asked if racism influences the behavior or attitudes of students, faculty, and staff at Georgetown, an astounding 59% of Black students agreed. At an institution like Georgetown, in a time when the nation is supposedly moving into a post-racial era, this is something that sticks out like a sore thumb. That a majority of Black students believe racism is present on campus shows that there is clearly a problem that needs to be addressed. To make it worse, a similarly surprising 41% of white students disagreed with the same claim, while only 28% of them agreed, less than half the percentage of black students. Again, we see a clear discord between two race groups on campus on the same issue. Black and white students stand almost as polar opposites to each other. Almost half of white students don't think racism influences the behavior of people on campus, while more than half of black students do. This encapsulates the difference that exists between students of different races at Georgetown. Similarly, when asked if racism is a problem at Georgetown, white students were the only ones who disagreed more than they agreed. 38% disagreed and 28% agreed. These sets of statistics show that white students are outliers when it comes to issues of racism and discrimination on campus. However, white students are not the only ones to disagree with the view that racism is a problem. 11% of Middle Eastern students strongly disagreed with this claim as well. Race relations sometimes tend to pit black and white students in a two-pronged scenario. However, the reality is more complex, and there is more to it than just black and white. Regarding discrimination, a large number of black students, 72%, agreed with the claim that students of color do face discrimination. In stark contrast, only 27% of white students agreed. They stand on the opposite side of the fence on this issue. Another interesting fact is that 35% of white students disagreed, making them the largest group to disagree, again displaying the complexity of the issue. 33% of Asian students also disagree that students of color face discrimination at Georgetown. This also shows that it isn't just white students who are impervious to the claims of discrimination that are voiced by minority groups. When asked how often they feel they are the target of discrimination by fellow Georgetown students, white students overwhelmingly said never, with 60%. Conversely, only 27% of black students responded with never for the same question. This furthers the divide between white and black students. While these statistics may seem repetitive, the lesson to be learned is that there is a clear disconnect, especially when it comes to black and white students. This is a problem that needs to be addressed before the actual issue at hand. Before tackling racism and discrimination at its core, efforts must be made for each side to be aware of the other's predicament. In a small setting like Georgetown, it is a shame that there can be such opposing views on the same things, even though everything that happens here occurs within a small radius. One student who took the survey suggested that, that professors take it upon themselves and make themselves available to augment the solidarity in the community. This student wrote, "If I hear about an issue regarding discrimination or racism, I want to be able to discuss it in the classroom, not just see a protest in Red Square." Thank you.
Our final research team to present is religion. The executive board members for religion are Ross Anderson and Yvonne Pliss. Ross Anderson is a sophomore in the college majoring in theology and philosophy. His other campus activities include ASK, the After School Kids program, Jew Brothers for Christ, and he also works closely with the Center for Multicultural Equity and Access.
Across the board, research indicates that on issues pertaining to the standards of diversity on campus, Roman Catholic students are almost always more confident and trusting of both the university administration and of the student body. Many explanations are possible for this phenomenon. Some of our researchers have suggested that there may be some correlation among Georgetown students between being Catholic and having a more privileged financial or social background. Others have raised the notion that Catholic students at Georgetown, being members of the best represented religious group on campus, as well as cohering with the university's own religious affiliation, have less experience with social exclusion or with being on the receiving end of discrimination. This phenomenon, which we have termed Catholic comfort, is more vividly expressed at a more personal level. 81% of Catholic students surveyed reported never or rarely feeling uncomfortable at Georgetown because of their identity, compared to 61% of Jewish students, one of the university's smallest religious groups. While it is clear that strength lies in numbers, the university regardless needs to be concerned for the security and inclusion of every religious identity on campus, from those served by Office of Campus Ministry chaplaincies to those in smaller student-run religious groups, to those who do not identify with any particular religious affiliation at all.
Another initiative that we came to is the improvement of the bias reporting system. As we've already established, the BRS is a great asset to undergrad students and can be used to report and act on bias incidents. Despite its potential, though, it is not effective unless it is used. Religious groups have not effectively utilized the bias reporting system. Yvonne just introduced the Catholic comfort idea, and this is also reflected in this report. Catholic students were least aware of the BRS at around 26%, yet they report the highest satisfaction with campus and anti-discrimination resources at about 58%. In contrast, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist students were most aware of the BRS and least satisfied. This shows us that the BRS needs to be better publicized and improved to meet the needs of Georgetown University students.
After analyzing the data, we have created 8 major initiatives and recommendations that we feel will help our Georgetown community. Our recommendations include, but are not limited to, new student orientation as well as housing. These initiatives will be presented by Kenneth Woods, Ross Anderson, Katie Noble, and Andrea Bischoff.
Hi again. I will be presenting our initiatives for the academics. Much of our research has shown that fostering diversity on campus continues to be a problem for many students. One way to address these issues of diversity and difference is through changes in the curriculum. What we have proposed is the following: an equity through diversity cross-listing curriculum requirement in all 4 schools. What this means is that courses that presently fulfill general education requirements will also engage in cultural, social, religious, and political dialogue, encouraging diversity. From this listing, students would be required to select 2 courses in their first 4 semesters. Adding this diversity curriculum does not limit students' freedom in the selection of classes. Rather, it expands the classroom to include practical and attentive ways to discuss and approach diverse issues during one's time at Georgetown and beyond. This will also require that the university recruit and retain tenured minority faculty. We also propose to match a 1-credit discussion and dialogue course with the diversity requirement. The 1-credit course option could focus on issues such as race, religion, gender and sexual orientation, socioeconomic class, and interdemographic dialogue. These dialogue sections could be taught by both undergraduate and graduate students, opening the classroom to the diverse experience of Georgetown students and making available all the resources the university has to offer. We believe these minor changes to the university's curriculum will enhance the university's image and the students' experiences on campus.
Based on this information, we also recommend that Georgetown work to market the bias reporting system more effectively. It was seen that people were largely unaware that it existed and were unlikely to utilize it even if they were aware. We recommend that the name be changed because the word bias is too vague and people may not feel that the type of incident that they witnessed is encompassed by that word. Therefore, the name should mention discrimination, or if the purpose is more extreme, hate crime explicitly. The bias reporting system should also be more aggressively marketed when freshmen first come to campus during new student orientation, so that they will be aware that this resource is available to them. This would be achieved by adding the website for the BRS on existing promotional materials such as keychains and magnets. It is also recommended that the university publish information about bias incidents more widely in order to make students aware of issues on campus. This could also be an effective deterrent against people committing bias incidents because information on their discrimination will be available to their peers even if a name is not attached to the report. We also recommend that the university deliberately create a diverse residential experience for all freshmen. This would be enacted by diversifying each floor to obtain a racial minority to white ratio of 1:4. This would not require the university to get rid of charms, but that once the pairings were made, every student would be brought into contact with people who were unlike themselves. This is particularly important because of the close ties that people maintain with their friends from freshman year. Georgetown has already implemented one form of diversity on each floor by maintaining co-ed floors almost exclusively in on-campus housing. This is effective in producing relationships between members of opposite genders. This recommendation will require that housing work with the registrar's office in order to obtain information about the racial backgrounds of residents in order to make these ratios occur.
Hello again, I'm Ross Anderson, co-executive board member for the religion team, and I'm presenting the second major initiative on recruiting initiatives and the freshman experience. Our first initiative involves proposing that greater emphasis should be placed on the freshman programs that engage undergraduate freshmen to establish an inclusive atmosphere and build bridges while social groups begin forming. This initiative has several parts. For one, we want to make activities during the new student orientation weekend more diversity oriented. Since this is the only time to get the attention of all incoming freshmen, we want to push forth the importance of diversity. We can do this by holding film screenings of culturally diverse films, having a tour of different parts of DC, or anything that will expose students to things they might not have seen before. We also want to revamp pluralism in action. We want to do this and also expand diversity programming into the first or second years of the semester for each student through programming through Res Life, Student Affairs, Center for Social Programming, Georgetown Programming Board, and the Center for Social Justice. Additionally, we intend on reviewing the book for incoming freshmen that they're required to read. We want a book that engages serious social issues so students can have serious social dialogues in a safe space when they arrive on campus, potentially in their NSO groups. In these NSO groups, we also want to have a diverse group of advisors. We need to recruit diverse peer advisors for all incoming freshmen. We intend on pairing incoming freshmen with students from different cultural or religious backgrounds and publicizing the BRS in these NSO groups and during freshman orientation. We also like to require a seminar for international student orientation that highlights past bias-related incidents and use the BRS. Our second proposal involves creating and collaborating on initiatives to increase recruitment and retention of minority students at Georgetown University. One of the things we want to do is enact a DC Entrepreneurship Admissions Program. This program will target DC high school freshmen with the hopes that we can establish a real network that we can develop throughout their high school experience. We will create a college preparedness program that utilizes Georgetown University students to mentor and tutor while bringing students to take Georgetown classes, preparing them for their success in MSB and the business world. This program will work in collaboration with the World 7 Initiative, the Myers Institute for College Preparation, and the Office of Financial Aid to offer scholarships at MSB to high-achieving DC students. We'd also like to include an optional essay on the undergraduate admissions application. On this application, we want students to ask students to describe what diversity means at Georgetown with respect to Jesuit ideals, and ask applicants to reflect on this meaning and what diversity means to them using personal experience. We would also like to highlight Georgetown's diversity-related initiatives, diverse student body, and commitment to diversity in a welcoming packet for incoming freshmen and prospective students. This includes post and post-post review of admissions according to highlighted values of the admissions process. Lastly, we desire to have greater institutional hosting and cooperation with Hoya Saxa Weekend with CMEA. This includes funding Center for Social Justice tutoring and mentoring and outreach within the area to bring more DC students to Georgetown. Thank you.
Andrea Bischoff. I was the co-chair with Kenneth Wood of the Gender and Sexual Orientation Research Team. And I will be presenting the fourth major initiative. And I'm just going to run through it because I think it's really self-explanatory. So through our research, SCU has recognized the need for greater communication and interaction between the diverse campus organizations and between resident life staff and on-campus residents. SCU believes that diversity components within these two sectors of Georgetown life could be improved and have thus proposed the following potential solutions. The first is to encourage the co-sponsorship of Georgetown organizations throughout the school year. Namely, to set up greater funding, we have recommended a $10,000 funding redistribution for SAC dedicated solely for co-sponsorship activities, and to assign a Diversity Action Council staff or faculty member to help facilitate these co-sponsorships. Secondly, to require diversity training for student organizations. This is to be carried out by providing a special training session for solely club presidents, as well as creating incentives for SAC groups who send officers to diversity-related lectures. Instituting a diversity requirement, essay or otherwise, into the applications for resident assistants, orientation advisors, and peer advisors. And lastly, creating discussion seminars for incoming freshmen, facilitated by organizations like LEAD, Leaders in Education About Diversity, with the intention of making students aware of bias-related issues. Third, to better inform resident assistants, RAs, in diversity-related matters, to be achieved by giving RAs additional ideas on how to promote and hold creative diversity programs. Better engaging our university's student liaisons and organizations in diversity initiatives would help contribute to the fostering of inclusive community environments on campus. This comprises the fourth major initiative that the Student Commission for Unity will undertake this semester. Thank you.
Our final speaker for this evening is Brian Keston. Keston is a junior in the college at Georgetown as a theology major. Along with Brian Cook, he is the other co-chair and creator of the Student Commission for Unity. Keston started this organization to ensure that Georgetown is a diverse community and allow each student to learn while at this university, and allow each student to not only learn well at this university, but to expand their horizons and have the most enriching college experience possible. Keston has seen at SCU through every step of this process and has many visions for this organization in the future. Brian Keston.
Thank you all so much for coming here today. I really appreciate and I'm touched by the turnout that we've had today. And before I can begin sort of exploring the audacity that was required to begin this endeavor and see through this endeavor, I'd like to thank several people. First, thank God for entrusting us with this monstrosity. Thanking my parents, my brother John for shooting the video in the back, Brian's younger brother for playing some music for us before. I'd also like to thank, and if we could just give another hand to the executive board members for all the hard work that they've done. I also have to thank Jennifer Johannesson at the campus ministry office for her endless patience with my many copies that I've been trying to make over and over again, and for helping us with the beautiful executive summary that you have, as well as Radha Subramanian, who also helped design it as well. We'd also like to thank Jody Calendar and Johnny Solis for standing up for the project, and for Brian Cook for sticking by me through all of my intricacies and passions and things. So thank you very much. Now I'd like to begin. The Jesuit ideal of contemplation and action. St. Ignatius believed that prayer and reflectivity should so guide our choices and actions that our activity itself becomes a way of entering into union with and praising God. Contemplation is a critical dimension of the spiritual life, and it is reflected in Georgetown's commitment to prayer, worship, and retreats. In the academic life, a spirit of reflectivity is a critical aspect of intellectual inquiry, and pairing that with faith and justice. In 1965, the Jesuits made a significant institutional commitment to the service of faith and the promotion of justice. This commitment links the authentic following of the gospel of Jesus with an obligation to address the social realities of poverty, oppression, and injustice, While not all members of the Georgetown community would base their commitment to justice on these religious principles, our institutional commitment to promote justice in the world grounds our Center for Social Justice research, teaching, and service, and inspires numerous university projects with the underserved. 15 months ago, Georgetown students faced a crossroads. As we've already gotten into with the She Speaking in the documentary and discussing the controversy surrounding the genus 6, there were many issues that came up to the consciousness of students then, but it was not merely an incident that sparked this program. Instead, it was a campus climate that had far too much tension, that saw far too many things go unheard, that saw these issues publicly unspoken, privately castigated, and forcing students to internally negotiate the consequences of these incidents that happened. Brian Cook and many other students have already offered testimonies as to the experience of minority students on campus. And I stand before you as a white, male, Christian, affluent, straight student who has endeavored every moment of my free time in this project up until this point. So rather than getting into some of the experiences that I have witnessed, I'd like to share a few of my own. And seeing as we've been doing research and some of the other things today, I'd like to provide a few stories of my own in that case. So I'm going to trust that y'all think I'm interesting. So following that, my first story I'd like to share is sort of one of the pieces that create the puzzle as to why we did this project. The first of these pieces was when I was in second grade. In second grade, I had moved around from a couple schools, one to another, and was part of a majority of 95% and above white students at this school. I came home as a very sad second grader one day, and my dad looked at me and said, "Brian, what's wrong?" And I said to my dad, "My friend Timmy is a liar." And my dad looked at me and was like, "What's the problem? I'm not usually a very angry person, and I seem to be very upset." And I told my friend, and I told my dad that my friend Timmy had told me he was from Nigeria, and I could not conceive in my 8-year-old mind that people actually came to the United States from Nigeria. This sounds ridiculous, I understand. And I was 8 years old, but within my frame of reference, having never known anyone who was from another country, with the exception of some friends who had come over, and having gone through a segment of our curriculum that dealt with Ghana and only seeing people in loincloths and other things like that, I had no realistic expectation that my new friend Timmy Fadaran had been from another place. And dealing with these consequences, it dawns on me that what did it mean to that student to think that I did not believe him as an 8-year-old that he was from Nigeria, that was from his background. I move forward to high school now. My background is that my mother is from a fairly affluent background and my father is from a fairly poor background. And having always admired my dad's work ethic, I endeavored to work a little bit of my own. When I was 15 or 16 years old, I took a minimum wage job at the giant grocery stores. There I pushed carts up and down a hill, probably 20 to 30 hours a week, and sort of my diligent work ethic sort of resulted in me absorbing a lot of the hours of my coworkers. In this process, I got to know a lot of people who I wouldn't have normally known in the environments that I had been. And it dawned on me in this situation that the minimum wage that I was paid and that the other people who were paid working with me, that $5.50 an hour for the 6 hours I work, I made roughly $30 a day before taxes. And because I was under 18, I didn't have to pay union dues. So of that $30, I would pay a third of it just to eat, to go to work. But I also didn't have to pay housing fees, I didn't have to pay cell phone fees, I didn't have to pay transportation and rely on the suburban transit system that would in no way prepare other workers to get to where they needed to go. In this, I sort of began to understand a little bit more about socioeconomic inequality that I had already begun to understand. As a student in elementary school, like I had mentioned before, I went to a school where most of the students had been white, above 95% of those students. In middle school, I was thrust into a very, very different environment in Montgomery County, Maryland. They integrate schools by placing magnet systems in minority and low-income areas. So essentially what they do, to be very frank, is bus affluent white and Asian students into humanities and science magnet programs, respectively. And that was the case in my high school experience. That was the case in my middle school experience. And for whatever reason, I ended up being the only white student to play basketball in the mornings. But by the time I was in high school, I DJ'd Freestyle Fridays with my friends. It was affectionately termed white chocolate by the football team. Throughout all these things, learning how to dance, how to do go-go, which is specific to DC, not a go-go dancer, but dancing in the style that is most sort of common amongst DC youth. Learning all these different things amongst all this sort of reflection, being the only white player from my being the only player from my Magna program on the football team, being the only white student to go to these dances. Amongst all of those things, we celebrated in 2004 in my high school the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And we sat there watching a documentary on it, and I spoke up in class and I said, what's the big deal? We don't have problems like this anymore. Obviously, my mind has changed since then, but sort of, I think what it does is it shows insight into the development of a student like myself who had chance after chance after chance and privilege after privilege in safe environments where I was surrounded constantly, even in a school where 90% of those students were minorities. Every student in my class was white or Asian because they tracked us all through the same classes in middle school and through high school. And coming to understand that, one of my professors approached me and told me he would give me extra credit if I read Jonathan Kozel's Savage Inequalities. And from there, exploring the streets of Trenton, exploring St. Louis, I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. And in that process, and along the same time, another faculty member who happened to be one of my football coaches introduced me to the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And through this process, I began to find my faith as well. And in both of them, the Jesuit ideal of faith and justice resonates very deeply with me as things that I'm not able to extract one from another. Now coming to college, I came to Georgetown and made Georgetown my first priority upon reading the Jesuit ideals. I was fascinated, I was inspired, I was looking forward tremendously to being surrounded by those students who would engage those same topics, believe those same things, striving to be women and men for others, living generously in the service of others as well. And as you can see, I've surrounded myself with many of them. But at the same time, I found several frustrations. Before starting the Student Commission for Unity, along with Brian Cook, it seemed like every time I didn't go out with them on Fridays or Saturday nights, they would come back with a story of being turned away at a party or any other circumstance like that. We had our own issues in classrooms. We had our own issues engaging each other socially with the incidents that happens in residence halls, with students arguing whether or not they should use the N-word as white students to black students. Several instances that go over and over and over again. But not merely that, even beyond, after starting the Student Commission for Unity, beginning my journey into sort of my racial development and understanding, coming so far from where I began, I saw several students on Halloween, several white students dressed in blackface, and I can count myself among the 48.6% of students who have ignored an instance of discrimination in that case. Since then, I've reported probably, I'm sure Professor Williams would probably say that I report half of the things to the bias reporting system that comes in. And a lot of things has changed through that as well. I committed myself to this project and inspired by Barack Obama's message, I sent myself down to Miami, Florida to work on the Barack Obama campaign as a volunteer coordinator. There I saw people from every background working together for something that they believed in. So even through all the rhetoric, inspired, completely inspired by seeing the unity and the integration that we saw through that process. Upon the election of Barack Obama, all of our friends were euphoric. Those of us who had worked very hard. Several friends were in DC, were having a great time. And Brian Cook, our friend Reggie Laloy, and I ran the streets of DC, running to the White House, euphoric. And on the way, well, I should preface this by saying that about this time, Brian was kind of in at this stage where he liked to take a cab everywhere. And so we got about halfway up to the White House, and Brian decides we're taking a cab. And I'm like, so I'm a very stubborn person, so I say, no, Brian, we are not taking a cab. Not just because I don't want to pay for it, because I want to run. I want to earn it. So we argue about this for a good 20 minutes, and we're standing sort of along the bridge over on Pennsylvania Avenue. It was about as far as we got. And Brian was able to convince Reggie that we should take a cab. So I'm standing about as far away as the door from them, scratching my head angrily as they put their arms up, hailing cab after cab, driving by and picking up white students from GW to take them to the White House. Cab after cab after cab, until 10 minutes later, Brian and Reggie grabbed me and ran, and we came over and we literally walked in front of a cab and got into one of them. On the eve of our entrance into the post-racial world, the consequences of race permeated every moment of that experience for us. As we reflect on this project, as we reflect on what we've tried to explore, tried to understand as students from 18 to 22 years old in collaboration with extremely experienced faculty and staff from all different backgrounds, we've engaged several different topics, engaging every element that we could think of in these conversations, both private and in the research teams as well. It is our sincere belief that diversity is not just something that we uphold as a way to make each other feel better, as a way to engage each other or to break down barriers. But diversity is intrinsically tied in every way to equity and social justice. It is intrinsically tied to the way that we value each other, in the way that we understand the commonality of our human experience. And in these understandings across human experience, we tend to grow ourselves. And as I tell about my own progress, from the student who could never believe that someone actually came to America from Nigeria, to going to believing that Brown versus Board of Education is a thing of the past, that schools were very integrated. As I sat in the school, 25% black, 25% white, 25% Hispanic, and 25% Asian at Montgomery Blair High School in Montgomery County, having very, very, very few classes with any students that did not look like me in a school of 3,500 students. The sheer ignorance and the sheer disbelief that could have crossed my mind is striking to me now, and something that I've spent a great deal of time developing. But in reflecting on all of these circumstances, reflecting on the growth of my faith, reflecting on my passion for social justice, and trying as best I can to inspire that in a university that I love and care about deeply, and in the student body that I identify so closely with, we've come to a point where we realized dialogue was not enough. While being an integral part of what we need to do, institutional change has to be at the core of what we do to engage every student on this campus in these conversations, so that these kind of situations where it's not just simply someone saying, oh, you know, are you an athlete? Because it is not just as superficial as that, as mistaking someone for a commonly held stereotype, but it is the challenging of the intellectual capabilities of those students to get here based on merit rather than based on their athletic talents. To affirm for every student on this campus that they deserve to be here and deserve the right, the equitable right, to pursue their own happiness and to pursue their own major and their career after their major. Pursuing these things is something that Georgetown can offer, not just to every student that goes here, but can expand beyond the walls of Healy Gates. We believe this so sincerely that we've spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours hoarding ourselves up in different study rooms. Brian and I have been in the library probably 16 out of the last 16 hours a day for the past week trying to put this thing together, and just trying to get, in every way, a communicative research report that demonstrates not only evidence of the problems beyond and less than what we saw in our own experiences, but trying to figure out through best practices, through communicating and collaborating with as many administrators as we could possibly talk to, and as many students as we could engage from all kinds of backgrounds. In doing this, we could come up with a unifying project, a unifying model for a university, looking at what other universities do and looking at the resources that we have on this campus. The inspiring, beautiful, talented students, the caring and compassionate administrators who work diligently to prepare an incredible undergraduate experience for all of us. So we seek to foster greater collaboration, seeking to explore and expand and allow that equity that has been allowed to me with the many second chances that I've been offered, expanding it into Southeast DC and expanding it into the various backgrounds and various upbringings and various socioeconomic climates and racial climates and religious climates and sexual orientation climates that surround the students in every area around here. So I would like to conclude by saying that equity is not something that we are just putting forth through diversity. That equity is not something just that people who do gap year, or people who do service for life, or go and do Teach for America, people who are educators, or people who are defense attorneys, or anything else of that matter. Equity is a part of every one of our experiences, whether it's the way that we raise our children, whether it's the way that we carry ourselves in our office, behave as role models to the people around us. It is our responsibility not just to others who are marginalized, but to ourselves, so that my experience of exploring my own humanity, of growing and development, doesn't have to be the same as mine, but is afforded to every person. And through that, we become more complete as a human body, as a human experience. And doing that at Georgetown, we have the unique ability to spread that equity, to spread our belief in social justice and all of the things under the Jesuit ideals across the world in a way that makes the world and the country a better place. So thank you very much for coming and sharing this with us today. Thank you for listening to me drone on both in meetings that you've probably all heard me speaking at before and in these moments now. But I just would like to close by emphasizing that this is something that we have endeavored so earnestly, because we believe in the power of this university to transform the world. That the things that we see on Southeast DC don't have to be there. That the things that we see on those sides of the street are all things that we can remedy through collaboration and through creative utilization of our resources available to us. Thank you.
We would like to thank everyone for coming to our presentation, and we're finished. Thank you very much. There will be a reception in Healy Hall in the second corridor. We'll see you there. Thank you.